Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Switching up the location here. Got me more in my element in my room. What's my reason? Tension is to be open and be vulnerable and share. And if it can help someone, that's great. One last thing is, you know, it's really important for me to be open and transparent because there's a lot of spiritual wisdom and people sharing a lot of stuff, which is great, which is awesome. um, but for me, it's important to bring up the concept of discernment, and feeling within if something resonates or it doesn't, and placing no judgment on it. Just, does this sing to my heart? Does this feel right, or does it not? And for me, it was by going within to be able to have these higher awarenesses, right? And this higher perspective. And this story it's a mixture of exactly that. It's literally, I'm sharing the shit, and then I'm sharing what I heard after it. So it's this band, it's this dance going on. And we're about to get into the gunk now. So here we go. I was living in San Diego at the time of this initial ascension wake-up call, having moved there in 2010 from Buffalo, New York, to further my education in the holistic arts. We can skip this part because I already said it. It talks about how I already held my chiropractic and masters and went into massage school. That's why I went out there. Went to massage school and learned all about the Eastern philosophy. And I wanted to do this in order to help as many people as I could because not everyone responded to the same things. So I wanted to equip myself with multiple techniques. The other driving force that led me across the country was my desire to escape my current circumstances in Buffalo, expand my horizons, and follow a long-time dream of moving out west. I wanted to create a new life for myself. Prior to making the decision to move to California, I'd found myself in love yet again with another man who I thought for sure was the one. He was vastly different from anyone I had dated in the past, especially from my most recent ex, with whom I'd spent nearly 7 years. This new man was a free spirit who had traveled the world and was quite passionate, to say the least. He decided to move to San Diego with me, and in my mind, we were going to live happily ever after while dancing in the sun and sleeping in a bed under the California stars. We were similar in many ways. We loved intensely and without reservation, and allowed ourselves to be swept away with bliss. It was premature, though, and to our detriment, for we each carried our baggage of old heartbreaks, childhood wounds, and bad habits. My insecurities got the best of me, and within 6 months of our move, our relationship went up in flames. It was a pretty nightmarish time to navigate through. Lost, heartbroken, and hopeless, I turned to my loyal comforting agents: alcohol, drugs, excessive exercise, binging, purging, anything to numb the pain. I also began an immediate hunt for another boyfriend to fill the gaping hole left in my heart. I thank God for allowing me to see the light through the wonderful friends I had made there. They were my saving grace. Yoga also became a huge part of my life. It was like church, therapy, the gym, and my social scene all wrapped up into one. There were classes that I literally wept through the entire thing from start to finish while on my mat in child's pose. The same thing would happen to me in school while lying on massage tables during bodywork sessions from my classmates. One minute I'd be in bliss from having my back rubbed, and then out of nowhere I'd be sobbing for no apparent reason. And this type of thing never happened to me in the past. Between school and yoga, I was beginning to connect to my body, heart, and mind in ways that I never had before. I was learning that our bodies are like filing cabinets for our emotions. Painful emotions I had locked away long ago were now being given opportunities to be released from the thick web of fascia in between and around every muscle, tissue, and organ of my body. I started to catch glimpses of the ever expansive universe we were a part of and what it meant to be a soul and to be made of light. I used to tell others that being in a massage school was like 25 years of therapy condensed into 2. It was the first time in my life that I'd sat in a circle with a group of people, divulged some of my darkest fears and secrets, and listened to theirs as well. The healing that can take place in a container of heart-held space with genuine compassion cannot be measured. To look into a stranger's eyes and be so deeply seen is a true act of vulnerability and courage. Having someone witness you turn into a puddle of your own suppressed tears from a place of non-judgment and absolute presence is probably one of the deepest forms of transformational healing that can be offered. I lived in San Diego until the end of 2013 when I decided to return to my Buffalo roots because, drum roll please, I got back together with my 7-year ex, with whom I had broken up with before moving to California. Once again, I was allowing myself to be guided by romance and escapism. Turns out I had also returned home just in time for what was termed the polar vortex of 2014. There were record-setting cold temperatures and snowfalls, and there were times we were forced to stay home due to travel bans and closings. Who would have known that this storm was foretelling the second attempt of that relationship and the effect it was beginning to have on my heart? He and I had endured this storm together for 2 years, and it wasn't always gloom, for we also shared an immense love and devotion. However, it was with him that many of my wounded and shadowed characteristics were enacted. I had spent so many years with him, growing, evolving, and learning about myself and the role I played within a romantic relationship, albeit on a subconscious level. Saying goodbye to him again was devastating and led to another dark, toxic recovery period. 6 months later, I took all that darkness and toxicity straight into, you guessed it, another relationship. This time it was with a man on an entirely different part of the spectrum. It was amazing at first. I had never been in a relationship with someone who freely displayed such outward gestures of adoration. He made me feel beautiful. He made me feel secure. I experienced luxury with him in a way I'd only seen in movies. I'm so grateful for all of the opportunities he provided to me. I felt like I was living in my own episode of Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous. It was during that relationship, however, when I began to completely unravel. This lifestyle didn't prove to be the best for me, as much of it was steeped in excess. I ended up having a pretty horrific dark night of the soul experience, which marked the beginning of the end of that relationship. All the self-neglect I had engaged in over the years finally began to surface. I was so unhealthy. I was so depressed. I was so depleted. There were days I didn't want to get out of bed. I was going out every weekend, closing out the local bars and then bringing the party back to my apartment where it became the after-hours version of Studio 54. We'd continue the party until sunrise. Sometimes Friday would bleed through Sunday, and I'd have to pull myself together and feel human again by the time my alarm went off on Monday morning, and the weekly cycle would begin again. I was terribly unbalanced in every area of my life. I worked too hard, played too hard, loved too hard, thought too hard, fought too hard, cried too hard. Life, all of it, was just too hard. I experienced extreme highs and extreme lows week after week. I was like a wild wrecking ball destroying the walls of my own house. I was honestly beginning to believe that I'd rather die than continue living this life. The dark night of the soul continued throughout most of 2017, and it was clear that spirit was starting to get a little antsy and frustrated with my apathy towards following their guidance. Entire loaves of bread were being thrown at me, and I still refused to take the bait. I saw all of the signs urging me to let go of situations that had served their purpose and were no longer in my highest good. My body was screaming at me from abusing it physically, mentally, emotionally, and verbally. I was exhausted, yet I couldn't sleep. I felt all the emotions urging me to make critical changes within my life, but the combination of fear, complacency, stubbornness, addictions, determination, and codependency was just trying to prove that screaming voice inside my head wrong, and it kept me stuck. I stayed in this familiar little bubble because it gave me some weird sense of comfort, even though I was running out of air and slowly suffocating. It was so hard for me to let go of certain situations, romantic relationships in particular, because, they were made out of love at one point, right? And they were exactly what I needed. I thought that if I stayed, I could figure out how to make everything feel like it once had. Remember what I said earlier about my personality cocktail? I really didn't like to give up on things. I was dedicated and determined to a fault. Dedication and determination can be useful when applied in a healthy and balanced way, but when motivated by fear, it is a recipe for disaster. I felt that if I released my grip on the relationship, I would be losing my safety and security. What I failed to recognize was that if I just let go of whatever it was that was giving me the false sense of security, be it a person, place, or thing, I would actually be reclaiming and making room for fragments of my own soul to come back in. Calling these fragments back would allow me to cultivate my essence, my light, my power, thereby enabling true safety, security, and stability to be established from within myself. In time, the divine purpose of these people, places, and things I held on to would be revealed as a reflection, showing me what I needed to provide for myself. Back then, however, I was the queen of excess and intoxicated from chugging my own dysfunctional brew. One night, angry, drunk, and high, I had a complete meltdown and outburst of rage. I literally fell to my knees in my bedroom and repeatedly slammed my hands on the floor and screaming at the top of my lungs. It was as if Kali, the Hindu goddess of death, time, and doomsday, was rippling up and out through my veins. Or perhaps it was the warrior goddess and divine mother Durga, who birthed Kali from her forehead in an enraged fury. Whatever force took me over that night, it was definitely an SOS for spirit to come in and take the wheel. My guides were like, "Move over, honey. You're done. You've taken us around the same block one too many times. You're putting us all in danger, and we really don't want to go to that stupid rodeo you insist on taking us to anymore. My spirit guides always respected my free will, but at this point, they had to make a judgment call and step in. So they took my keys and told me to enjoy the ride because they were driving now. Needless to say, that relationship exploded and catapulted me into a completely new realm. My ascension was about to be fast-tracked. On August 7th, 2018, I had a Kundalini awakening, which was the most profound thing I have ever experienced. What follows will sound more like a science fiction movie you would see on the big screen, but let me tell you, it was real. I had made arrangements a few weeks prior to receive a massage from a friend. We tried to make it a habit of setting up bodywork exchanges with one another to maintain at least some level of self-care while juggling our busy lives. More often than not, though, our appointments with each other got postponed, cut short, or slipped away with time. Our self-care meters were definitely reading on the low end. The day finally arrived when I was going to receive the nurturing care I desperately needed. I arrived at my office, where most of our healing sessions took place, and hopped onto the massage table. My friend asked me what I wanted her to focus on during my session. If anything hurt in my body, you know the deal. The series of events that happened next are somewhat difficult to explain due to the intensity of the sensation I was feeling and how everything was happening so fast. But I'll do my best to be accurate. Also keep in mind that when I tell you what I saw, it was what I saw in my mind's eye. My physical eyes were closed and I was laying face down, but it was as if I was in the middle of a 3D IMAX movie being projected onto the back of my eyelids. Rather than giving my typical response that she should pay extra attention to my aching shoulders and tight hips, I replied, "I don't even know. It's just a vessel." She didn't question my bizarre reply and proceeded to allow her hands to be guided to the areas on my body that needed some love. As I lay there, heavy on the table, I began to see flashes of images. This was the most recent thing that had begun to happen during bodywork sessions, both those I gave to others and those I received. I'd see and perceive information, be it through an animal, a symbol, a person, or a place. Sometimes I would sense and feel an emotion attached to what I saw. I would often explore this new gift with my friend, knowing that as an intuitive empath, she would understand. As I lay on the table, I started to see images of brown lattice-like structures with glowing spheres along the side. I wasn't quite sure what that meant, and I wasn't in the mood for conversation, so I just kept quiet. My friend then said to me, "I feel like I'm seeing alien DNA." I instantly validated that, as it seemed to correlate with what I was seeing, and that's when things got strange. The left side of my body started to go completely numb, beginning with my left leg. We continued receiving similar images, one being of cement encased on my foot. As she energetically tried to remove the imprints of cement between my toes, I was overwhelmed with an intense feeling of fear from sinking to the bottom of the ocean. Then I saw a giant man with a bird's head and long beak watching me from the corner of the room. He looked very ominous and towered over me, just staring. Many months later, as I was searching for Halloween costumes, my jaw dropped as I came across an image that reminded me of the giant scary bird man in the corner. It was of Thoth, the Egyptian god of writing, wisdom, magic, and the moon. Whether it was him or something else being presented to me, I don't know. I just wanted to provide a visual representation of what I saw. I started sobbing, gripping and writhing on the table. I felt intense pain and like my chest was exploding. I must have said something to her about seeing or sensing others around me because my friend, being as calm, centered, and grounded as she could be, guided me to ask them if there was something they wanted to tell me. Still crying, scared, and wanting to crawl out of my skin, I asked them if there was something I should or needed to know. I received the message. It was part of the mission. We tried to save you, but we had to leave. I sobbed even harder as extreme feelings of betrayal and abandonment came upon me. I started pulling what I could only describe as techno bugs out from all over my body, as if my body was being used as an experiment of some sort. I was so confused, sad, and angry all at the same time, and I felt like it was just all coming out of me. Then I felt and saw a wave of red energy wash over and envelop me, which gave an energetic impression of a phoenix. I felt and saw a bright white light shooting out from the center of my chest in the form of what seemed to be a geometric shape. Then, all of a sudden, I felt like I was no longer in my body, and my entire consciousness was up in my head. My friend was still holding my feet, and it felt like she was sculpting me a new body, kind of like Frankenstein. It was similar to that dead sensation you feel when one of your limbs falls asleep before the pins and needles sets in. At this point, I was calm, I was still, and I was observing. Then, one at a time, the most beautiful colors I have ever seen flew over me. I say flew because the colors appeared in the form of lavish feathers that looked to be made of velvet. They were incredible. Within each colored feather existed the entire spectrum of that color itself, every shade and tint, and containing shimmering flecks of gold. I remember seeing large wings of deep blue, green, gold, and white, and perceived them to be the archangels, Michael, Raphael, Uriel, and Gabriel. Then I got super hot as a heat wave went through my body and I saw purple everywhere. I literally heard a booming voice in my left ear say, "Archangel Ezekiel," and I saw a figure in a purple robe hovering above me. I saw a stream of gold light codes and sacred geometry being poured and funneled into me through my crown chakra. I was completely surrounded by swirls of opalescent colors, and it felt like angelic hands gently touching and caressing me. I began to cry from the insurmountable feelings of unconditional love and bliss. There truly aren't words to describe it. Then it was as if I was standing amongst all of them in a bright marble room. I felt so protected. I felt completely safe. I felt peace. I felt like I was finally home. Suddenly, a tube appeared before me. I somehow knew that I had to go, but I didn't want to, and I told them so. They assured me that I was never alone and that I would never feel abandoned again. I traveled through that tube and saw Earth at a distance with a metal plate placed on it, which I perceived as a portal opening. It looked like something you would see in Star Trek. And I heard, "That's where you go in." Then it was as if I was soaring over the ocean and rainforests. I specifically remember seeing pandas and giraffes. Right after that, I was back on the massage table and was fully aware of being back in my body once again. At some point during all of this, I vaguely remember my friend asking me if it was okay if she stepped out of the room to take a phone call. Somehow I managed to let her know that it was, as I lay there on the table, naked, alone, and unable to move. I knew it was time to get up and get dressed, but I didn't know how. I slowly and clumsily pushed myself up from the table and onto my feet and then stood completely naked in the center of the room. As I looked around the room and saw my diplomas on the walls, it felt vaguely familiar, yet I was reading my name like it was a reminder to me who I was. I felt like I was tripping my face off from eating a bunch of magic mushrooms. I didn't know what to do with myself. My friend knocked on the door and came in to see me standing there confused and struggling to dress myself. She asked me if I needed help, to which I replied yes. And we sat there on my massage table together as I held onto her arm and tried to explain everything I had just experienced. She suggested that we go outside so I could put my feet onto the grass and ground myself. And I agreed that was probably a good idea. She helped me first to the restroom and then down the stairs that led to the door outside. Words can't express how grateful I was for her loving presence throughout it all. Upon opening the door, I was greeted by the sun. I went to the center of the lawn in front of the building, that building being a church. Yes, at the time my office, along with my friend's yoga studio, was inside of a church. As I stood on the grass and took in my surroundings, it felt as though I had been dropped into a simulated game. Everything looked slightly different. I said to myself, well, if I'm going to be here again, I may as well plug back in. Over the next few minutes, I slowly came down from my high, but from that day on, my entire reality shifted. It was as though an entire bag of breadcrumbs were dumped onto my lap, but would only begin to make sense over the many, many months and years to follow. That said, for at least a month afterward, I felt like I was a little kid again. I was filled with so much joy. I wanted to play outside and ride my bike everywhere. I approached every day from a new mindset of curiosity and playfulness. I wanted to color and play games and draw on the sidewalks with chalk. My life was forever changed that day in August. There was no more denying my truth, going back to sleep, or pretending that I didn't have a small flashlight and a spiritual Swiss Army knife with me at all times. I knew I had all the tools I needed to start creating the life I truly desired. A new life built upon a foundation of love, balance, grace, service, joy, light, and passion. But it was up to me to build it. I'll pause there. Thank you again so much for listening. And tune in again as the saga will continue. Love you. Bye-bye.